of Johnson County, JOCO Community Radio.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. If you're trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
You're listening to JOCO Community Radio.
Well, good afternoon, Johnson County. Welcome back to today's episode of Let Freedom Ring. I'm your host, Jake Wernette. Thank you for sticking with us after Tuesday's broadcast. We're here discussing essentially this first segment's going to be a continuum of the current events, congressional events that we were working on for Tuesday. The second half today is going to be discussing youth political attitudes. And I know that's something that you might have been on here for the last 6 months and might have heard one point or the other, but I think it's very imperative that we discuss the attitudes of today's youth in politics, the role the impending doom or success that it's going to play into the furthering future of American politics. It's a necessary discussion that needs to happen. So, second segment, we're going to be doing a call in. Don't feel like you have to wait on me if you're going to call in. Uh, Busy us up, interrupt if you want, contribute to the discussion. If you have any criticisms for me, I take criticism pretty lightly. I have pretty thick skin. That's not to say that bow and arrows and stuff aren't effective anymore, but take that as you will. So first, we're going to be discussing a few articles that I have. I'm going to be going over these real quick. I had initially touched on a few on Tuesday. We discussed Moderna spying on American citizens on over 150 million different websites in 200 countries. We discussed the Biden administration calling for the censorship of the $16 McDonald's menu item meal things that were going around on TikTok. How Biden is colluding and his administration are corrupting interrelations. It's like inbreeding with social media to suppress the outrage at the machine that Americans have for not the American economy. This is a wonderful economy. It's a wonderful country if it would work as the way it was meant to. But we have too many sucky politicians, too many sucky leaders, too many people in here doing things the old way and trying to say my favorite president was FDR. I feel like we are in a time of national crisis. We need to build up the government. We need to have price controls. We need to have a command and control economy. This isn't a communist country, folks, and I don't stand behind the Biden administration's effort to continuously censor the opinions of the American people because he's so afraid, as an illegitimate dictator, that he feels like he has to shut the front door of the American people up because he doesn't take criticism lightly, and neither do the marionette masters who are really controlling things. And that's not to say that we have some sort of shadow government or new world order, but his corporate oligarchs that were put in positions of power that we have yet to figure out, the ones that were paying for his campaign, the big unions, the big companies. That's not to say any of the laborers or the people in those unions or the people in those places of business are bad, but the people that are running them don't have your interests at heart. Just like the gentleman who is the CEO of Pfizer, Moderna, don't have your interests in mind. It's all a profit gimmick. Everything is derived because people want to manipulate and play categories with the American way of life until they can get as many points as they want racked up. It's like Monopoly. So, this first article, many of you remember the NBC article from last Tuesday, I hope. If you don't, it was essentially saying Biden will have trouble cracking down on domestic terrorism because of free speech in the FBI. Although NBC, I went through that article, never really clarified, in my opinion, too well what they were referring to as free speech inhibits governmental operations. It's kind of how this government was founded. It's kind of how this country was supposed to evolve into a place that is unlike any other place across the face of God's green earth. Many of you, if you're not looking at the screen or those online, I am wearing my one of my pretty good trademark shirts. A pledge a day keeps the commies away, with the good old fashioned Old Glory on there. I don't take kindly to communists in my government, and I don't take kindly to them telling me lessons on economics. Takes a pretty brain dead person to go along with the master of public opinion and say that the only system in the world that will rise us up out of the disparity of capitalism, and the only system in the world that's brought up the most wealth, the most efficiency, the most productivity, the most brilliant technological innovations, is also the one that has murdered almost half a billion, if not more than half a billion people. So this first article is in the Supreme Court section. It's a follow-up to the Department of Justice article that NBC put out 2 years ago, was the one that we discussed and mentioned on Tuesday. This is the follow-up to that. Supreme Court blocks restrictions on Biden administration's efforts to get platforms to remove, you heard it right, remove social media posts. The Biden administration had called a lower court injunction unprecedented, for restricting officials' ability to raise concerns about problematic social media content on issues like COVID-19. Now, here's the problem that I have with the National BS Corporation or National Broadcasting Corporation's free speech, in case they're listening. That was my free speech criticism, my redress of grievances to NBC. The National BS Corporation has put out this article. Here's what I love about mainstream media is they put out a title. They put out the most outlandish communist titles, and then they follow it up with something that has nothing to do with the title. So explain to me, it seems kind of counterintuitive or regressive to me, how you can say administration efforts to get platforms to remove, ergo censor, because you're taking off something you don't want on there, to remove social media posts. And then it goes on to say the Biden administration has called a lower court injunction unprecedented for restricting officials' ability to raise concerns about problematic content like COVID-19. So here's the regressive logic for those of you out there listening to this. Removing social media posts, apparently those that you don't want on social media, is censorship. I think we can all agree on that. If a Republican gets in and takes down the DNC's Instagram post, that is censorship. I don't care whether you're a Republican or not, that is censorship. You have a Democrat who gets in and wants to get rid of posts that are skeptical of agendas that he wants to propel himself, very radical agendas, whether you are for or against those agendas. If you were to take down the posts that were pro your agenda, that is still censorship. So explain to me how censorship is not clarified in the subtitle, but their definition of censorship has nothing to do with removing it in the subtitle. It says officials' ability to raise concerns about problematic social media content like COVID-19. So can they not raise those concerns without removing our social media posts? Can they not raise those concerns on everything that was federalized under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, unconstitutionally, of course? Does the Biden administration has such a fear of people being against them? Why not take to NPR, the public corporation radio that the federal government finances? Why can't they go to the go out and do fireside chats like FDR did? If you have a big problem, there's another way. So there's two right now that we come out with: federal radio, federal TV. Oh, why not just come out on the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission? Why not have them put out a memo? Why not have them put out a standardized message to the American people? Why does it always have to be the expense of the American people getting censored that administrations and tyrants like Joseph Robinette Biden, which sounds like a very, very girly middle name to me, why does it always have to come at the expense of the American people losing their freedoms because people are insecure, emasculated? If you want to say, if a woman was in the White House, I would say she's lost her femininity. What they have done is these politicians get in and they control the power of the purse, the power of the sword, the power of the pen, and they control us, the American people, because somehow they have lost taste, they have lost the touch, they've lost the entire mindset to begin with that we are the masters of this government. We are the masters at the helm of the wheel of the destiny and divine providence for this country. And yet we have these people that get up into the highest offices in the land and they say, well, I just don't think I like the way you're talking about me. Who gives two rats and a wool sock whether you care about what I'm saying about you or not? That is my God-given right in this country. Whether it's at the expense of a public corporation on the NASDAQ like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, those rights still hold up, just like the Supreme Court case that ruled that free speech is still allowed in public schools. Once you walk through that door, I had an incident in high school. I was in a biology class, And the teacher was not teaching anything. We were merely having a discussion in high school biology class, one of the last days of the semester, and we got into debating creationism versus evolution. And I got into making the point, isn't it funny how there are so many coincidences in the theory of evolution that exactly at the right moment you have to have the RNA or whatever strain of genetics is in the water to be zapped by that exact lightning bolt at the exact place at the exact time that it's there. Where does this stuff come from? How does the molecules of water form RNA if there is no living material or genetic code in the water? It's another coincidence that you have a lizard who decides, somehow I'm going to evolve eggs that have to be laid on land so I can get up and walk away from the water. It's another coincidence to say, well, all of a sudden I just don't feel like living in the water anymore. I'm going to go up on land and live here. And I was talking to my friend, completely different political affiliation from me, but that doesn't matter. We were having a civil discussion about this in a public school where my parents' tax dollars went at the time. My tax dollars went because I paid taxes as a working citizen in the city 2 years during high school when I got old enough to get a job. And I said it's a lot more plausible to me as a Christian to say that you have a God who created the universe and you were made especially for the time and the place and the era in which you live. It's a lot more plausible to me than having all of these coincidences. And the teacher says, I mentioned the word Christ. I said, I believe that everything was created in the beginning by God through Christ. And the teacher looks over and says, oh, we can't say that in this classroom. And this is a story that I tell to people, but I haven't really told it on the radio that much. So I hope you're enjoying it. And she says, we don't say that in this classroom. We don't mention our religions in this class. I said, so I can't mention a God unless I'm not a Christian, or I can't say that I have to believe in evolution because I'm in this classroom. And so all of a sudden the teacher was taken aback to that. And she says, well, if you're threatening my classroom rules, then I'm going to send you to the office and ensure that you get a good week's worth of detention. I said, you go ahead and sign that paper because the moment you do, I will take this all the way to the Supreme Court and I will ensure that the school has to fire you so that they can compensate what they pay you to pay me back for the rest of creation because I will get something out of this and it'll be from your pension plan because my constitutional rights follow me through the door of the school just as they follow me on social media. And if the Biden administration has a problem with that, then they can take it to the Supreme Court. Because I really do hope that there is one state, one American citizen who sues the pants off of this federal government should this have not happened. And so they go on to say at this time in the history of our country, what the court has done, I fear, will be seen by some as giving the government a green light to use heavy-handed tactics to skew the presentation of views on the medium that increasingly dominates the dissemination of news. That is most unfortunate, Justice Alito wrote in a dissenting opinion of this. It goes on to say, Elizabeth Prelagar, who was, I believe, appointed by Barack Obama as Solicitor General, she is now back with Joe Biden, wrote in the court papers that Judge Doty's decision was an unprecedented injunction that flouts bedrock principles of federal law. No, like the freedom of privacy, the freedom of speech that we are given through the Constitution somehow is overruled by what they consider federal law. Well, last time I checked, federal law doesn't hold crap to the standard of the U.S. Constitution, which has been the law of this land for 250 years almost, and it will remain for another 250 more. God forbid that they don't come in here and trample it all over and write another one. Says the court imposed unprecedented limits on the ability of the president's closest aides to use the bully pulpit to address matters of public concern, on the FBI's ability to address threats to national security, and the CDC's ability to relay public health information at platforms' request, Elizabeth Prelagar added. So let me ask you something, Elizabeth. I really hope you're listening, because my question to you is, if the federal government has control of everything already, they don't even need our social medias. All they've got is our IP address. They can censor us or shut off our internet at any time that they want. How are you taking the right of the the president's closest aides? Can the president's aides not go to the bully pulpit, or the very stupid reference to President Theodore Roosevelt's bully pulpit, as he called it, taking public referendums to the Congress and addressing Congress with the public concerns? Can they not do that without censoring the American people, Elizabeth? I'm not even going to dignify you by using your last name here. You don't deserve the respect of the American people if you don't think that the FBI is able to address threats to national security without censoring the American people. I don't know what anybody thinks about this, but if you're willing to give up all of your freedoms for a little bit of security, you deserve neither and lose both. If you're willing to give up your rights for security, you don't deserve security. You lose both of them, matter of fact, as Benjamin Franklin said. And you're pretty stupid if you're a Solicitor General for the United States and you don't think the CDC can relay public health information without censoring the American people. Here's what it's about, folks. You have Amber Alerts. You have federal emergency alert systems on the phone, on the TV, on the radio. At any moment, if the federal government wanted to get something through, all they've got to do is shut down transmission of everything else and put in an emergency alert message. It's the way they do with ICBMs. That's the way they do with biological threats. That's the way they do with terror attacks. The FBI has all this illegal security software that they use to track, censor, and monitor the American people's phone calls. The NSA, the CIA do it. Can they not just take whatever they want already without censoring the American people? This has gotten too far. And if this is the way that the federal government is going to handle things, I don't think a legitimate government is ever worried about their citizens, because if a government is working under legitimate circumstances, there is no reason for the American people to fear what's going on. There is a mutual relationship of trust built up after centuries of operating the correct way with the correct people as their bosses. That's how it works. The social contract, our Constitution, is two things, in my opinion. That is a redress to the government of what their rights are, and enshrines the protection of individual liberties. What we give up to the government and allow it to do in respect to defending our freedoms and our God-given rights. That is what the Constitution is first. The second is it's a social contract that tells the government, if you really trust the American people, you will never have to go outside of this document. And if the American people trust you, they will never abridge what is in this document. It's a mutual trust relationship. And if the government doesn't trust the citizens, then I don't think that the citizens ought to be able to trust the government. There's nothing in my Constitution that says I have to give up my rights because the government doesn't like the way I'm doing things. That's not how this country works. It's not how it's going to work. And the American people need to stand up and boot these jackbooted thugs out if this is the way that they're going to be running things. And I've probably gotten a little bit more open and verbose about my beliefs on this show in the last 6 months. And I'm proud of that, because it's time somebody my age stood up and said something, because it's gone far enough. And if the people of the last few generations, there are a lot of us. I'm going to say there's two types of people in this country: those who are afraid to stand up because they don't think that they're the majority anymore, and the people who just don't do anything. And the third group of people, I'm not even going to dignify that, those who don't care. It's just gone on this way forever. Why should I have to change? Let me tell you something, buddy. Would you rather be let out in shackles and go to the work camp for 24 hours a day, 2 days a week, and then be given your little loaf ration of bread, the little crumb and the little Dixie cup of water for the day, and then have to go home on your minimum livable wage and then pay all your subscriptions? I got that overdue library book that I still have to pay off. 2 days rental cost me $500 with inflation. That's the way things are going to go if nobody stands up in this country. I'm not talking about armed revolution. I'm not talking about any of that. We, as an American country, have the ability that nobody else in this world has. Our power division in this country is the lowest of any country. If we wanted to, we could walk right into the Capitol building, put our name on the list, and go speak in front of the House or the Senate. It's that easy. In this country, we have the ability to write to our senators and our House members and say, if you don't vote the way that we want you to on this bill, we're getting you out next time, buddy. There's nothing that says that you have to stay in that position. There's nothing that says that you have to stay in there and badmouth me and get rid of my beliefs because you don't like the way that I think about you operating this country. There is nothing in our Constitution that says there is something called term limits already. It's called re-electing or getting somebody out. Too many people in this country complain about the way the founding fathers wrote term limits in the Constitution. I wish they'd have done this better. I wish they'd have done this better. Well, maybe if we were a little bit more knowledgeable, if most of us cared about who is in office, we would vote somebody new in instead of getting the same guy who gives us the same crap day in and day out. It's what happens when you have a guy who's been in the Senate for 47 years and runs things in the White House like the back of his hand, like he's the most corrupt guy on earth. Forget the guy on the Dos Equis commercial. He's the most interesting man in the world because somehow he has yet to tell us that he knows why we keep voting him in or why his electors keep voting him in after they get screwed over every re-election. Before we spend too much longer on this, I've got a few things on here that I just want to touch on. Recently here, this was put out November 29th, just yesterday, from Breitbart News. 54 bipartisan lawmakers urged Speaker Mike Johnson not to slip the deep state or the 702 section deep state surveillance authorization in the defense bill. I'm sick of people putting these stupid bills. Here's what they do. It's called a rider, RIDER. When you tack a rider onto another bill, it essentially ends negotiation on what could have been a separate vote. Because somebody wants to curb-tail the system and they say, well, I'm so worried about this not getting favorability that I'm just going to tack it onto something else. And if Section 702 doesn't pass, guess what? The military doesn't get a budget. The equipment doesn't get paid for. So now our senators and our House members and the jackbooted Republicans who are just going right along with the Democrats who are afraid to stand up against their own party anymore, are now being forced to choose when these illegal surveillance bills get put onto the National Defense Authorization Act. And what it essentially boils down to is they've put you in two categories. You either don't like illegal surveillance and you vote against it, and the military doesn't get funded. People don't get paychecks, equipment, uniforms don't get distributed. Or two, you can vote and say, we championed a bill for national security and we gave the military a bigger budget. We got more pay put out to our soldiers. But what we're not going to say is that the American people are now having another illegitimate spy program put out for them. So you really don't win either way. The military either gets taken advantage of by the federal government, soldiers of the state, soldiers of fortune, instead of soldiers for the American people. Let me tell you something. Here is another verbose view that I'm going to put out there. I think it's time that we realize in this country that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, coast guardsmen, that our Marines in this country have done enough for us. It's time for us to stand up for our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, our guardsmen again. We did during 9/11. Whatever happened to us? What happened to the country that championed our boys that came home from World War I, the doughboys, that came home from World War II, and we said, these guys are the epitome of American success because they gave up a good, leisurely life, and they went overseas and fought in a war that they didn't have to. The men that signed up to go to Vietnam instead of were drafted, they heeded the call and took up arms for Lady Liberty in another country that they didn't have to, in a war that we should have never been in. Instead of waiting to get drafted and told, well, I guess I have to go. Where are we in standing up for our veterans? In telling our Congress members, we don't want an illegal surveillance bill, put it in another one, get rid of it, and pass the bill that pays our soldiers what they need to get life done. That's what needs to happen in this country. I have another one here. I'm going to skip over the other articles that I had about Mike Johnson here. Really strange guy. I don't know a whole lot about him. I don't even think that I really have any information on the guy. I've heard a lot of mixed things on Instagram comments on his page about him. The Richmond Observer put out an opinion column by Mr. John Whitehead. I really recommend everybody go read it. It's called "The White House Goes Rogue: Secret Surveillance Program Breaks All the Laws." And he talks about the AT&T program, Hemisphere. It talks about DAS that we discussed Tuesday. And then it goes into 702 and all these other ones that are being put in now. John Whitehead does a great job of that. Next segment, we're going to be discussing youth attitudes. Why are youth going communist? Why are they declining in patriotism? Stay with us. We'll be right back the next segment.
Attention all business owners and creative minds. Do you need a unique and personalized touch for your products? Look no further than Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs. We offer custom laser engraving services for a variety of products, including promotional items and corporate or personal gifts. With state-of-the-art equipment and a team of skilled designers, we can engrave intricate designs on virtually any material. Whether it's a special message, a company logo, or a custom design, Romika Laser Engraving will help you make your mark. And the best part, our prices are affordable and our turnaround time is quick.
I couldn't be happier with the work Romika Laser Engraving did for me. The engraving on my product was precise and exactly what I wanted.
So don't wait any longer to add a personal touch to your products. Call Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs today at 817-400-4040 or visit our website at romikadesigns.com. We look forward to helping you make your mark.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second half of our show. I'm going to let Benny Goodman and his orchestra finish up here. Never get tired of Mission to Moscow. First, I'd like to say Joco Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio Network. TuneInJoco.com is the place to find all of the best ways to listen and watch. Station app is also available for free. I highly recommend it. It's both on Android and Apple devices. Simply search your store. Check out our lineup and more at JocoCommunityRadio.com. This episode more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your local Texas sales rep at 844-839-4245. That's 844-839-4245. Be sure to dress your arms and more at thetiffy.com. It's not with me here, but I already finished the extra large tea from the Burleson HTO. Wonderful as always. Happy hours 2 to 4, $1.99 drinks as big as your regular Sonic cup. Go try it out because inflation's hurting all of us, and HTO has heeded the call and understood that. They're doing their public service. It's time for us to support a local business. So I'm going to be going over a few articles here today. The second segment is going to be all about youth attitudes and really advocating for the parallels of, I'm going to say, the thesis statement here. Why Gen Z needs another Dwight Eisenhower. There's a reason Ike's my favorite president. I bring him up a lot on this show. God bless him. And God rest his soul. He's probably rolling over in the grave every other year that we get some idiot voted in. So Gallup is going to be the first one that I discuss. I'm just going to be leading the discussion on. This is going to be a call-in segment. So the station number is going to be 817-637-2585. 817-637-2585. If you're going to call in, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter what time you do it. Feel free to call in, jump in, put your 2 cents in. Take 2 cents away from me. The unlike inflation, your opinion is free here. So Gallup, this is a June 29th, 2023 article. Extreme pride in being American remains near record low. And it goes on to show a few graphs. I love Gallup's graphs. Them and Pew Research have some really good articles. U.S. adults' pride in being American from 2001 to 2023. And the question that they asked are, how proud are you to be an American? Extremely proud, very proud, moderately proud, only a little proud, or not proud at all. The extremely or very proud has gone from 2001 being 87% to about 91% in 2004. That was at the peak of the invasion of Iraq and Kuwait and all those other things that we were trying to get rid of. Al-Qaeda, 2004. This was roughly middle of the beginning of the Afghan war. We're now at 67% are extremely proud or very proud. The extremely proud, just extremely proud, not including the very proud, was 55% in 2001. The highest it's been in the last 20 years was 70% in 2003. We're now down to about 39%. I want to quickly discuss the numbers of this for a second before we move on. I'm 21 years old. I was born in 2002. You have an entire generation of people since this survey first started that have become voting age adults, at least within the last 3 years. So in the last 3 years, the extremely and very proud has gone from 69 to 67, 43 to 39% on both of those. That means some of the people that were surveyed in here versus the 85, 57% in 2013 that were not adults, Gen Z is now being part of this survey. And it's ever declining. We went over young people, political views between Gen Z men and women here a few episodes back. I don't remember exactly what day it was. Go back and look at it. I'm sure you can check the title out and see the description of young people's politics, something like that. It'll include something. And go back and watch that episode on top of this one. Partisans' extreme pride in being an American 2001 to 2003. Republicans, the highest in the last 20 years, was 86% in 2003. The highest for Democrats, 65% in 2003. And the independents, 62% in 2003. That's declined a little bit, 26%. You're talking about a fifth of the Republican Party that has been surveyed in the last 20 years has dropped down to 60% pride in this country. Democrats, it's gone down a hell of a lot more than that. We've gone down from 65% to 29% in the Democratic Party. And the moderates that were barely hanging on, the people that didn't have a party, went down from 62 to 33. There's not a lot of pride in being an American anymore. And that could be not any more true than in my generation. I walk around, I go to class, I hear people say all this country's done is colonize. All it's done is force its imperialist values. All it's done is take advantage of the rest of the world. All it's ever done is just skimp on the rest of the world. I have a word for young people out there. We talk about these trusts in government. We talk about these pride in government. 1958, Eisenhower's trust and approval rating never went below 70% in his presidency. The only person that's ever beat him was Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1964 after passing the Civil Rights Act and passing the Great Society programs. And even then, he was only 4 points higher than Eisenhower. We're now sitting at 16% for the trust in our government. Donald Trump was sitting at about an average of 17%. So you have an entire generation of people that have become voting age adults here in the last 10 years, here in the last 3 or 4 years for my generation. I'm going to tell you how my generation feels, both as Democrats and Republicans, because I've talked to them both. I myself am a part of the Republican Party here in Johnson County. I don't like to say that I'm just a Republican. I like to say I'm an American citizen. There's some things I agree with Democrats on. There's some things I agree with independents on. There's some things that I agree with Republicans on. Because I'm an American citizen first, whatever benefits my country and whatever's implemented properly in the interests of the American people is what needs to get done. The will of the American people needs to prevail over who you are as a party, who you are as a person, your race, your ethnicity, your nationality, your immigration, your status as a Republican or a Democrat. Well, I'll tell you what happened. I'm gonna skip down to the line here. Our generation, Gen Z, needs a Dwight Eisenhower, and I don't mean a war hero president, a general who's been put in there. They're all establishment elite types now. In the presidency.ucsb.edu, the University of California, Santa Barbara has this wonderful thing called the Presidency Project. I'm going to go to the 1952 thing here, and we're going to discuss the polling numbers here. 1952 overall, Dwight Eisenhower. I'm going to give a quick statement here. Before Eisenhower ran for president, he had no political backing. He had no affiliation. He was not a Democrat. He was not a Republican. Both parties fought tooth and nail to get this man in there. Adlai Stevenson was the worst case scenario that they could put in there as a Democrat. Why? Because the Democrats wanted Dwight Eisenhower as much as the Republicans did. Why? Because Dwight Eisenhower came back from Europe, said we need to massively update our public infrastructure. We need highways, we need bridges, we need airports built, we need all this stuff. And we need to not necessarily decrease our national security, but cut the military budget of useless spending. We don't need to go to war. We need to invest in nuclear science and missiles to get our troops home. We need a presence abroad and at the same time be able in 15 minutes. I think the fastest it ever got down to was 10 minutes under John F. Kennedy after Eisenhower had implemented the program to get a nuclear bomb loaded onto a B-47 Stratofortress and fly anywhere in the world within 15 minutes. Every day, B-47s were up in the air, Kadena Air Force Base, up in Alaska in Fairbanks, over in MacDill down in Florida, over in Dyess up here in Fort Worth, over at before it became Joint Base Fort Worth. It was where the old Convair factory was. Anyway, Eisenhower knew the gamble of going to war. Didn't want to do it. But he knew that we had weapons of mass destruction that countries would dare fight us with. So America put him on a plane and said, any one of these planes could have a nuclear bomb on it. Just take your chances, Soviet Union. And you know what Khrushchev did? He sat right down in Geneva, right down in Switzerland, and let Eisenhower chair the meeting for international security. The Soviets sat right down and listened to Dwight Eisenhower tell them what was going to happen. So this man had no political backing, had no affiliation, no endorsements. He was a war hero, so everybody wanted him to run. Eisenhower was not by any means a household name, though. Eisenhower was known as a war hero. He was not known as a politician. People, matter of fact, the majority of the country voting Democrat at the time because of FDR's legacy and Harry Truman being his vice president. Harry Truman getting the majority of the credit for ending the war, which I would argue it was Dwight Eisenhower over in Europe that set the standard for the end of war. Harry Truman God forbid, wasn't out there fighting on the war front, sitting safely at home in the White House getting it renovated because he wanted a luxurious lifestyle that the taxpayers were paying for and footing the bill for a deficit that hadn't been cut in 20 years. Eisenhower cut it down in less than 3 years of being in office. So this man had no political affiliation. He was not a political household name by any sense. But Dwight Eisenhower, because of Herbert Brownell and a few other guys that were Republican donors at the time, had went up to Eisenhower and said, "Now's the time. Most of your values align with us. You need to. The American people need you." Now, I'll tell you what I read from many of Eisenhower's own books was that he never saw politics as a chance at winning because of a party. He never saw it as a chance to beat somebody. He saw it as a war. And like a general needs to win a war. And when Herbert Brownell and all these guys came up and said, Herbert Brownell being the Attorney General, I believe, after Eisenhower got in at the Department of Justice, Brownell looks at Eisenhower and says, "We need to have an hour-long meeting. We need to sit down over in London before you get you get back from your diplomatic trips to Europe and stuff with NATO at the time." Sits down with Eisenhower for about an hour. Nobody else is in the room, and he says, "General, the American people need somebody that's going to fight for them. They have nothing to believe in. Everybody's voting for Harry Truman. They don't want another 4 years of a Democrat puppet who's just going to keep spending like this, who gets all these programs put in and never helps the American people." Told Eisenhower the economy is suffering because of war. We're in a war that we can't even fix over in Korea. Eisenhower fixed it in 3 or 4 months, if you can believe it. Walked right across the DMZ, shook hands with him, and said, "Here's how the peace deal is going to go. You're going to cut the I believe is the 38th parallel here. Don't come back." So Brownell's sitting there. He says the American people need to win this war with their government. The American people need a hero who's going to champion their interests because people feel left behind. People feel left out. Here's why Democrats and Republicans voted for. Matter of fact, here in his first election, he gets 83% of the electoral vote and 55% of the popular vote. 83 out of every 100 Americans knew the name Eisenhower with no political affiliation. Eisenhower never held a city council seat in his life, never held a state legislature seat, never held a seat in Congress, and yet this man has 83 out of every 100 Americans remembering his name when they go to the polls. Because he ran it like a military. His campaign, he even said in his memoirs, he said, "I ran my campaign like I ran my army because this was a fight for this country. It was a fight for the common man because they felt like they were left behind, that they were continuously having to foot a bill that the American people would never be able to pay off, a deficit that they were chained to." That was the state vote, the electors. 55 out of every 100 Americans, almost two-thirds of the American nation went to the polls remembering Dwight Eisenhower. Now we fast forward to the 1956 elections. You might say, well, 54.9, 83.2 elector. Remember that, 83.2, 54.9. Now we go to 1956. 86.1, up 3%. The popular vote, 57.4. That's up about 4%, almost. So you look at Dwight Eisenhower. He's become a household name in this country. 86 instead of 83 out of 100 Americans, at least the electors, voted for Dwight Eisenhower. 57 instead of about 54% remembered Eisenhower his second election. No man, and I'm going to show this to the other camera here, aside from Ronald Reagan, if you can look at this graph here, this is about how many states he won. And right after Alaska and Hawaii almost becoming states here, they became states, I believe, in about 1959. the territories voted red. Hawaii hasn't voted Republican in generations now. Aside from Ronald Reagan, nobody has carried such a vote since Dwight Eisenhower. So when I say our generation, Gen Zers need another Dwight Eisenhower. We don't need another general. We don't need another war hero becoming president. What I mean by that is we need somebody with no political affiliation, somebody who both sides are going to fight for, but manages yet to keep us out of war, keep us out of debt, and keep the American legislature in check in his presidency or her presidency. The American nation today, my generation, desperately needs somebody who is not a household name, somebody who's going to fight for the people more than they fight hard for a legacy. Eisenhower never wanted a legacy. He didn't even want to put down the pencil and retire after becoming president. The only reason he ran a second term was because his wife was scared that if he didn't stop working and doing what he loved, that he'd have another heart attack and collapse on her. If you really read the memoirs, that's why he ran. Number one, to fulfill the will of the people that he felt he left undone his first term. And second of all, because he felt like if he stopped working for the American people, that's when he would die. And that's when he did die, at Walter Reed. He died in 1969. Congestive heart failure. He was on morphine for the last 3 hours of his life. He just couldn't take anymore. You have somebody that's willing to go through 3 or 4, 5, 6 heart attacks in office. We need a leader who's willing to put the American people before themselves. Eisenhower put the people before his own health. I'd be sitting here saying the same thing if Dwight Eisenhower ran as a Democrat. Why? Because it doesn't matter of the party of the person. What matters is how they stand in the fight against good and evil. Are you going to fight for what's right, or are you going to fight for yourself? Are you going to fight for what's right, or are you going to fight for your party? Are you going to fight for what's right in the American people, or are you going to sit down and bicker about everything? Because that's the state of affairs in this country today. Do we need 4 more years of somebody who's going to make us foot the bill? I would love to show everybody the graph of the national debt. Matter of fact, I'll do that next week. I'll bring in here and we'll do a whole episode on the national debt. We're going to do a whole week series on a generational divide and see. We're going to sit down. We're going to have somebody from Gen Z that's not me, somebody that I might not even know very much politically about. We're going to have somebody from the millennial or the Gen Y generation sit down somebody I don't even know. We're going to have somebody older that I might or might not know that I don't get to discuss politics very frequently with. They could be a liberal. They could be conservative. Why does it matter? What we're going to sit down here and figure out at some point in the future is a week-long series, both Tuesday and Thursday, and we're going to find out 3 generations of people. We're going to sit down and figure out where this country went wrong at. We're going to find out in whose generation. We're going to find out what exactly ruined American politics for 3 generations. What we need is another 4 years of Dwight Eisenhower. Metaphorically, somebody who is going to fight for the American people at the expense of their own health, if it comes down to it. Somebody who has the most qualified people in their cabinet. Eisenhower was the first to desegregate the military. He was the first to have a black man in his cabinet, and the first man to have black advisors. As a Republican, where was Adlai Stevenson's black campaign staffers? He got all the states that wanted to keep segregation. Shoot, Orville Faubus carried the election for Adlai Stevenson in Arkansas because Adlai didn't have a position on segregation. But Herbert Brownell fought tooth and nail. Even though Dwight Eisenhower was very skeptical of desegregating things, Herbert Brownell said, "Sir, if we don't do it in your administration, this evil is just going to continue." And Eisenhower said, "I put you in this position because I like you and I trust you. Do what's best for this country." And that's where it came in. Brown v. Board, all that stuff followed suit. Because Eisenhower, even though saying it was his greatest regret, he nominated and confirmed as Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren, who is a more liberal in progressive societal problems. desegregation more than anybody else. Him and Brownell spearheaded that from the Department of Justice and the Supreme Court. And I'll tell you what really, knowing all of this now that you do, that I've just explained, can you blame Eisenhower for having a 73% trust rating from the American people? Nearly 8 out of every 10 Americans like the guy. And I guarantee you that 50% that he carried, that 60% vote almost from the American people, 35 million Americans, I guarantee a great majority of those were Democrats. Why? Because FDR got those numbers. He got more than that. Harry Truman got more than that. Here you have, we need a Gen Z Dwight Eisenhower. We need somebody from another generation, a revival of Eisenhower-like politics. Somebody who is going to swing Democrats and Republicans to a side that is America first now. Somebody who, regardless of the party that you're affiliated with, is going to get behind somebody who's going to protect this country, who's going to keep us out of debt, who's going to take the ball and chain off of the foot of the American people. One thing I want to mention, the national debt was about $8 trillion when I was born. The great year of our Lord, 2002. $8 trillion. We're now sitting at a comfortable, let's look it up here. Let's look it up in real time. If you have a computer on hand that you're watching this with, and you can listen, you can watch, and you can do this at the same time, take a look at the debt clock with me. That's live time there, man. It says right now at this exact moment, we are sitting at almost $34 trillion in national debt. As of this year alone, the national debt has doubled in about 12 years. Let's say a decade. The national debt has doubled in a decade. From 2013, it was at $16 trillion. 2002, the great year that I was born in, before the war on terror, before the stimulus, before all this crap came out, we were sitting at $8 trillion in national debt. In my lifetime, $25 trillion. Now, for those who don't know this, a pallet of dollar bills makes up about 1 million. That weighs 2,000 pounds. On the standard semi pallet, 2,000 pounds is what $1 million weighs in dollar bills. It takes about 1,000 of those to have $1 billion. Think about that. So in my birth year, since then, I have seen $26 trillion. Imagine that in semi pallets, in just debt. Our interest payments are going to go up to $1 trillion a year starting in the next 5 years. We won't even pay off the debt. We'll be paying off the interest that goes up every year on that. My generation is going to pay that off. I hope. Or my generation will continue the trend that the boomers and the people that don't care have started. That's why I said you're either for or against this country at this point. Doesn't matter what party you're with. Doesn't matter what you believe. You can fix things, or you can keep things the way that they are. The debt clock that I had mentioned, it's just usdebtclock.org, usdebtclock.org. See all those pretty numbers going up. You can see the Medicaid burden that each American has. $7 trillion U.S. debt held by foreign countries. It just keeps growing and growing, man. You can look at student loan debt there. That's thousands, man. $1.8 trillion in loan debt per student. That's $39,000. Interest paid this year, $4 trillion. Total person's debt. Total personal debt of every American. Let's see, that's $25 trillion. Credit card debt. $1.3 trillion. Money creation. You can find all that stuff on there. So the question that I have to ask, I really do think we need another Dwight Eisenhower metaphorically for my generation. The Roman Republic, their total GDP at the peak of the Roman Republic was $97 billion. Ponder that. $97 billion is what the Roman Empire was worth. We're at $34 trillion in debt. God bless you. We'll see you next week on Let Freedom Ring. God bless you. God bless the United States. And may the blood of Christ wash over this government. We desperately need it.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godly, this is the voice of Johnson County. Joe Coat.